is structured so that we are covering issues of contaminated sites from right back into the beginning of the Minamata disaster in Minamata city itself. And we progress through presentations by different speakers who I'll introduce as we go along, who have experience in contaminated site issues, both in ASGM, in the Indonesian context, impacts of ASGM in Bolivia, and also industrial mercury contaminated site remediation in Europe, dealing with particularly chloralkali, deserted chloralkali plants and the mercury contamination problems and remediation solutions that have been developed around those. So what we're really canvassing is the, I guess, entire arc of contaminated sites issues, human and environmental impacts and methods for dealing with these problems across a range of time spans and geographical locations. So I'd like to commence tonight's proceedings by playing a video presentation by Professor Shigeharu Nakachi. He's a professor with the Kumamoto University and the Open Research Center for Minamata Studies. And hopefully I'll be able to get that video to run now, and we'll take it from there.
Hi everyone, I am Shigeharu Nakachi. I am professor of Kumamoto Gakuen University. I studied Open Research Center for Minamata Studies. Today, I explain about the contaminated site problem of. Now I start explaining the location of Minamata. Minamata is located in the south of Japan. Minamata is located in the southwest in Kyushu Island. The Chiso Minamata factory, which is the cause factory of Minamata disease, is located in the coast Shiranui Sea. Everyone knows the Chiso Minamata factory was producing acetaldehyde and agricultural chemicals. The Chiso powered tonnage, including organic mercury, into Minamata Bay, and fish was polluted by a food chain and bioaccumulation. The person who ate polluted fish developed Minamata disease. This is the house where a first reported patient of Minamata disease lived in 1956. This is girl authorized as the first reported patient of Minamata disease. It will be explained about the situation of the contaminated site. Sludge was accumulated by the drainage powered into Minamata Bay from Shake drain. This sludge contains high concentration mercury. There is a report that is included at most 30,000 ppm. This is about an environment protection measure in Kumamoto Prefecture did first. In 1974, a partition net was set so that a polluted fish didn't go out from investigated the density of the mercury included in bottom mud in Minamata Bay. It was based on survey results, and sludge including mercury was dredged beyond 25 ppm and reclaimed construction was planned. There was no ability in Kumamoto Prefecture, and the Japanese government developed a pillar-like way by steel iron and concrete. Sludge was dredged by a pump, and the construction was continued carefully so that mercury sludge wasn't diffused. On the other hand, Kumamoto Prefecture captured polluted fish in Minamata Bay, stuffed a drum, and reclaimed its sludge. The left picture is just the starting of reclamation work in Minamata Bay. A right picture is the just reclamation has completed new landfill. This landfill was called Eco Park. This landfill will be a playground and a park, and they are still using it as the location of the relaxation. A signing ceremony of Minamata Treaty was held in 2013. I think the person who participated is here too. This is contaminated site. A quay in Egg Park is made with steel and concrete. The life expectancy is designed in 50 years. It's superannuated in 50 years. So it's necessary to reform once again and again. This contaminated site leaves a burden in the next generation. Mercury concentration of fish in Minamata Bay falls and falls below the standard value as a result of the reclamation work. It's because mercury is included in fall bottom mud in Minamata Bay. Another contaminated site in Minamata City, that's Atiman, dumping site of Chiso factory. Chiso changed the destination of industrial wastewater formerly. Whole Shiranui Sea was polluted because Chiso was let run in Shiranui Sea from this waste dumping site, and Minamata disease patient increased. This is Atiman dumping site. Waste which contains mercury is dumping in Atiman dumping site, Atiman pool. Reclaimed waste was made from carbide production, and highly alkalinity has begun to spread over clay. A clay bank is superannuated, so there is a possibility it breaks. The part was damaged because of the Kumamoto earthquake in 2016. When a big earthquake occurs in the future, a quay is broken by a tidal wave tsunami. And there is possibility that Mercury spots by liquefaction. There is a possibility that Mercury flows in Shiranui Sea. Minamata City made a reclaiming plan, landfill plan by the surplus soil discharged by freeway development construction to protect Atiman, a dumping site. Is that landfill work has been begun from last year, but a quay next to Minamata River is just as it is. And the possibility that Mercury flows by an earthquake is here. I propose utilizing the soil pollution restoration technique, which came to practical use, and collecting Mercury. I think it's best for restoration of a contaminated site. I think it should be stopped to turn a bill in the next generation. I think that is the environment. I think that is the environment justice. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Nakachi from the Open Research Center for Minamata Studies, for that very interesting presentation on the remaining legacy issues that are still a problem for the environment and human health at the epicenter of the Minamata disease site since the 1950s. For our next presenter, we have Guido van der Kottele from TAU, which is a major remediation and engineering consulting firm in the Netherlands, who have been involved in remediation of mercury and POPs contaminated sites, both in Europe and in a number of developing countries, where they aim to transfer technology to assist local governments in those locations to better manage the remediation of contaminated sites. And I'll just move and share my screen and bring Guido's presentation to bear in just a moment. And that's not the correct one. Just give me a moment. And I'll start it from the beginning. There, I think that's correct.
Yes.
Guido, are you happy for us to continue from here?
Yes, thank you, Lee and Atiman, for allowing me to speak at this event. As you can see from the title, I want to bring to the attention abandoned chloralkali facilities. It's been more of a personal thing for me because I've encountered these sites throughout my work in various countries, and I'm really wondering why we're not doing anything about these locations. And I believe that it's important to bring to the attention of the international community. If you can go to the next slide, Lee.
Yes, I will try. Sorry, but it doesn't seem to want to move. Oh, there. Is that the
there
correct
you go.
one? Sorry. Right.
So briefly about TAU. TAU is a Dutch engineering firm. We work mostly in Europe. It's about almost 100 years old now. We have about 1,200 staff. And we work on dismantling of mercury cell chloralkali sites in the Netherlands, in Germany, Spain, and France. And this we do mostly for the big industrial clients. So they will just have money and they will tell us, okay, we want to do everything in the highest standards. And these are pretty complex processes. Next to that, we also do work for UNDP, UNIDO, World Bank on contaminated sites and POPs projects in various countries. And TAU is a employee-owned company. We are really in favor of sustainability. So we also have a foundation. And through this foundation, we support various environmental projects throughout the world. One of them is, and Yuyun of Nexus 3 Foundation will talk about that a bit later, is the support of small-scale mercury remediation at ASGM sites in Indonesia. Below you see some pictures of a demolition process that we've been doing in France. So yeah, where we actually clean up and demolish one of these big sites. My name is Guido van der Kotelat, and maybe Lee mentioned it, not completely, but I'm a project manager at TAU, and I mostly work for projects in developing countries. Next slide, please. So yeah, why do I bring it to the attention? What are we looking at? So some research of myself over the past couple of years, I found some lists, and in reality, I mean, there were over 700 chloralkali plants operating worldwide in 1999. 250 of these plants actually started before 1975, so they've been in operation by that time already for 30, 40 years. And especially in the developing countries, a lot of these sites were operated by smaller or local chemical companies. In 2015 even, mercury cell technology was still present in 75 plants worldwide. Now, if you look at that picture and then you look at what the mercury cell industry historical losses were, I found figures that in the US alone in 1990, these facilities, and that was about 30 facilities, lost 220 tons of mercury. So your loss per facility, you're looking in the range of 5 to 10 tons, and this has been going on for years. Now, even the UNEP, they estimate total losses to water and air from, for instance, contaminated sites, and not even talking about the buildings, is 80 to 130 tons. So yeah, they are still a source, and a source that continues to contribute to mercury contamination in their surroundings. Next slide. So I looked at some of our own projects where we've done the demolition. I looked at some data of other projects, and you know, where is the mercury at these sites, at these abandoned sites or sites that are no longer in operation? What we see, for instance, is that the walls and the roofs of these locations have high concentrations of mercury. We're talking up to 5,000 milligrams per kilogram. And the higher you get into the building, the more you get, the closer you get to the ceiling, actually concentrations rise. If you then assume, you see everything's concrete, if you demolish that, the quantity of mercury that's actually left inside the buildings, you're really easily talking about 5 to 10 tons just in the walls. If you look at the floors of these mercury cell sites, I've seen concentrations up to 80,000 milligrams per kilogram in the concrete of the floors. And the buildings themselves are not big, but if you then calculate how much mercury is left inside the floors, you're talking about, well, in the worst case, up to 100 tons simply in a floor of a building. Now, in addition to that, when we have demolished some of the buildings, as soon as you start to remove it, you'll find pure mercury underneath the floors. It goes down along the foundations. You'll find it in the soil, and you'll find sludges all around. So you'll have a lot of these sites, and my quick estimate is that it's easily 20 to 30 tons of mercury that is still left behind. And each of these abandoned sites, and it's just there, it keeps spreading. A lot of these locations are either next to the coast or next to a river. And yeah, it needs to be addressed, and we need to do something about that. Next slide, please, Lee. So what normally happens with mercury cells or chloralkali sites? From our experience working for some of the biggest chemical companies in the world, a lot of them have, or at least in Europe, have started to dismantle their facilities, or actually in the process of doing that. Collect the mercury, it's sent for stabilization. We do a detailed inventory of the buildings, they're decommissioned and they're demolished in a very much a controlled environment to limit the dust formation, to really separate the waste streams, and everything's done with a high level of health and safety measures in place. There is a very strong focus on reducing the waste, and that's of course cost driven. Parallel to that, soil and groundwater is investigated and or remediated using a variety of techniques. It really depends on where you are and what the soil structure is. So this is how it's done, and I would say how it should be done. Now, next slide, Lee. What happens at the abandoned sites? Well, I've seen already quite a few just in the last year alone. What you see is that war, market changes, other economic challenges has led to the bankruptcy of many of these sites, and especially the ones with mercury cells. I mean, in the Balkans alone, you're looking at 4 or 5 sites that have just been left there, for future generations to take care of. The picture you see here on the right, it's the Ohis site in Skopje. If you walk around there, you'll see the pure mercury on the ground, left and right, the droplets everywhere. And I'm visiting these sites in many cases because of other problems. So they have a multitude of issues. The Ohis site, for instance, in Macedonia, used to produce HCH. So they have a big pile of HCH contaminated waste there. You see at the Hak site in Tuzla, they have used PFOS firefighting foam, so you have another PFOS problem. A lot of these problems, sites have a multitude of issues. And if I then look at the list of sites from 1999 with 700 locations, and I see quickly that there is such a big problem already just in the Balkans, I would estimate that there's 30 to 50 sites at least that are completely abandoned and just left out there for the environment to take over, but to continue to spread into their surroundings. Next slide, please, Lee. So what's the normal process at these sites? It's a normal process of most abandoned sites. First, anything of value, including most equipment and the main mercury stocks, are sold by the owners, and then it's just left to rot. And then the building is stripped of metals and any other valuables by the informal sector. So there's no more control. People simply enter the sites, they take anything of value, they don't know what they're taking, they don't know if it's contaminated or what the problem is, and then anything that has no value at all is just left to crumble. There is absolutely no control. Things go into the sewers if they have any, it spreads into the surroundings, dust comes up. Some cases they take away some of the rubble, but they'll just send it to the local dump site because they don't know that it's saturated with mercury in many cases. So next slide, please, Lee. So what do we think should happen? Well, I think creating value is key. I mean, most of these sites, if we don't create value for the future, you'll just spend a lot of money on cleaning it up and you have nothing, just an empty place left. But how to create value? Firstly, there is always ownership issues. I mean, a lot of these sites are bankrupt. Sometimes they're partially owned by the authorities, by the government, but sometimes there is a shell company left that are trying to, hold on to whatever value they think they still have. But yeah, it's a difficult process to go through. But if you don't do that, then it's impossible to start working on these locations. Secondly, we need to prevent access because these sites, they're dilapidated. People come in, sometimes they might even start to live there. So yeah, they are being exposed to the mercury. We should explore opportunities for revitalization of the area, set boundaries what is possible, because revitalization of these industrial sites can bring new jobs and also give a bit more input for the local community to start addressing the issue. A detailed inventory, normally when you do this, a detailed inventory of building material and the level of contamination is necessary. We should establish a clear status of soil and groundwater, of course. And there's always a combination with other contaminants typical at these sites. You're going to look at fluorobenzenes, you might have other POPs out there. So it can be a quite complex issue. But on the other hand, you can also focus end of pipe if there's any receptors. And if you then try and focus on that, then you might see that the need for remediation of the soil and groundwater at the site is not as high as you'd think initially. Proper waste management, also very important because you want to prevent any of the materials from ending up in uncontrolled landfills, and control of demolition and remediation. You should create flexibility in the quantities and methods throughout. When you take care of these sites and when you clean them up, you're gonna run into problems. It's going to be different from what you expected. You open up a floor, you'll find pure mercury, you haven't calculated on that. So you have to be as flexible as possible when it comes to these operations. Last but not least, ensure your aftercare is an absolute minimum. Now, so what should the international community do? I think as a first, we should have an inventory to see how many of these facilities are around and what is their status, you know? Are they still controlled? Are they still operating? Who's the owner? And there will be quite a few that are just simply abandoned, and we can hopefully see if we can do something about these sites. As an example, we did an HCH inventory. HCH is a POP pesticide in the EU, and where we thought there would be 44 sites, we in the end ended up with 299. That's just the European Union alone. So if we have a good look at what's actually happening, we'll probably be able to find a lot of these source areas worldwide. After that, I mean, I think it can be good for the international community to create a showcase, but a practical one that, okay, we have this abandoned site, look, this is how we can address it. So it can be an example for other locations worldwide, because the contamination, especially from the buildings, is kind of similar, because the buildings have a similar structure. It's usually the soil and groundwater that is a big difference. So yeah, these are quite a few of the steps that we can take. TAO, as a company, of course, we have the engineering experience, but we also have the foundation. So we are really willing to help, to see if we can put some of our own money into this, just to move things forward. And it's also a call that if you have projects or you have ideas, let me know, and I can see if we can team up. I can get funds from our foundation to start things, and so that we can start addressing this issue. That was the presentation, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guido, for that very informative presentation. A very interesting look into chloralkali plants, and not just the mercury that's left behind, but the enormous emissions and loss of mercury when they're actually operational. And my understanding is that there are still a number of functional mercury cell chloralkali plants in the world. There's not a lot of them, but there's still some out there. And as they switch over to membrane processes and non-mercury processes, the risk of both them becoming abandoned sites if they move location, or of them releasing their stockpiles of mercury onto the market is a significant issue. And the Minamata Convention does attempt to address that in a number of ways. So thank you very much for that. And I'll move on to our next presenter, which is all the way from Bolivia. We have Carmen Capriles, a founding member of Reaction Climatica. Carmen is an activist and campaign coordinator developing solutions for climate change, and also taking part in a range of mercury pollution and human biomonitoring projects in Bolivia, where ASGM is a big issue, and the mercury trade that happens both legally and illegally there represents a significant problem. And I'd just like a special thanks to Carmen for getting up extremely early this morning. I'm not sure if the sun has actually risen in your hometown today, but thank you for joining us. And I'll just move on to sharing your presentation. Just give me a moment.
Lee, can I share it from my computer?
You can try, yes. If it works, great.
Give me.
Yeah. I think you have the functionality to do that. If not, I've got it here.
Okay, give me a second. Looks like I'm able to share it.
Yes.
Here we go.
Thank you,
thank you, Lee. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this invitation. I would like to talk a little bit about the impacts of mercury on the environment and on human rights in Bolivia. Of course, we're speaking about the use of mercury basically for small mining. Well, we have here the map of the main of where the gold extraction is happening. And we have in Bolivia a very big spot. Historically, Bolivia has been a mining country, and a lot of materials and natural resources have come out of the country. And probably you will remember during the colony that we were the first exporters. And the process of the amalgamation with gold started in Bolivia in the mines of Potosí during the beginning of the colony. I want to show this graphic, which is official data from the Ministry of Minery. This is how much we're importing mercury, and this is how much gold we were producing until 2019. The data has changed since then. I have to update this slide, but the idea is to highlight how historically the import of mercury has grown, especially since the Minamata Convention enters into place, because a number of the neighboring countries have started to lower the use of, or forbid the use of mercury. So this is right now how the mercury traffic is happening worldwide. And we have here, as Bolivia is one of the main receivers of mercury from Mexico, basically. Most of our emissions are coming right now from the small scale mining, and the data is overwhelming of how much mercury, the trade emissions are having, and how little we're getting from these sites. So what we did is we started doing a gender study on mercury with indigenous people, that we knew we were going to find levels of mercury, but and thanks to IPEN and to the Biodiversity Research Institute, we were able to really make this study true and have the data. So these were some of the sites. Later I'm going to put a more, to explain a little bit more why the sites were chosen. And we were focused on only one indigenous people, which is the Cejas. It's a nomad tribe, but they live under the river. You can find Cejas in Peru, you can find Cejas in Bolivia. And the idea is that basic diet is based on fish and bananas or things they can get from the forest, because as I mentioned, they're still nomads. They are now settling because of policies from the government and worldwide policies that we need to settle down, but they've been living hundreds of years navigating the rivers and the Amazonic rivers. So, well, this is a graphic. Most of you know how the dredges, they get the gold, they use the mercury gets into the water, it becomes methyl mercury, and it starts contaminating the people. So here we have some of the results that came out from all this research, and we were astonished to see that how contaminated were these people, since they do not participate. The resources that they use basically for their diet is highly contaminated. So we can, this came from the comparatory studies of IPEN that has great database. And here we can see compared to Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, and Bolivia. And what we did is also work with the communities. We gave them back the results. We explained to them what these results meant and what they were, what the impact of the fish was having. Of course, it is overwhelming because the population, their diet is based on fish. So we have some of the data, especially this, how high the mercury levels are. In Yoquibo, we have around 32.4 parts per million, Portachuelo 11.7. So it is very, very important to take this into account, because it's an indicator on how high the contamination is happening in this river. So I want to, and here we can see a little bit more clear compared to Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia. We know that the allowed amount is 1 part per million. We're talking of about an average of 7 point almost 6, which is one of the highest compared to all the data that we've been seeing that IPEN manages. And this is overwhelming information, because we're only speaking about two communities of one indigenous nation. We also have at least 6 other indigenous, different indigenous tribes and nations that live on the site. So, well, this are the data around the world. You can see that Indonesia is around 6, and we got around 7. So it is showing us that we are in big danger. Here you can see the dredges that are doing this job for us, extracting the gold and leaving only the mercury. And also it's important to mention that Bolivia only gets 2.57% of royalties from gold mining. So all the rest is just going to packets where we don't know who, but it's not staying for the country. So this is the Yoquibo people. These are some of the fishes they harvest for their consumption. And here are the sites where we did the sampling. One is in Yoquibo, which is down the south near the Furrenabaque. The other one is in Portachuelo, a little bit to the north to this river, which is called Madre de Dios, which comes from Peru. And this is one of the most important biodiversity that in two protected areas. One is Madidi, National Park Madidi, and the other one is the indigenous territory Pilon Lajas. We did the sampling, this sampling of Portachuelo right here. So this river just passes through the middle of this very important biodiversity corridor. So this is not a problem against about mining and indigenous people only. This is a bigger problem which involves one of the most important sites of biodiversity, a hotspot of biodiversity of the tropical Andes. And you can see here in the map which are the priorities for conservation. And we have all this big area, one of the most important in the region, being affected right in the middle because the river Beni passes right through the middle by Mercury. And we're talking that in this area, we have, for example, considering that all North America has only 2,000 birds and that all Europe has 500 species of birds, we are speaking about a high value site on biodiversity. So, and all that is being contaminated by the demand that we have for gold, the high prices, and the use of mercury that still doesn't have an alternative, a viable alternatives. Although there are efforts around the country to have these alternatives, and now there is a demand thanks to this study and thanks to all the work done. Also, a huge thanks to Marcos Orellana, who's the rapporteur on toxics, that has also put a lot of effort on this issue. We are getting some pressure, but still the impacts that already this hotspot of biodiversity has had, it's huge and very hard to evaluate. So some of the recommendations is to take immediate measures to stop the import of mercury, because it's also a commitment to the Minamata Convention. We need more health studies. We need more studies on the impact on biodiversity, on trophic chains. And thank you very much. I think that that's all the time that I have.
Thank you very much, Carmen. A very interesting study indeed, and some of the levels that we discovered amongst the Indigenous women who participated in the program were very, very high, amongst the highest we've ever seen in our sampling projects. And our projects are global. We've sampled in more than 35 countries. So indeed, it is a terrible problem that they have. And it's also a reflection for the rest of the country that these people aren't involved in gold mining. They are simply receiving secondhand impacts as a result of the contamination of the river systems from mercury use. So without further ado, I'll move on now to our next presenter, Yuyun Ismawati, who is a founding director of Nexus 3, and Yuyun works on ASGM issues in Indonesia and other mercury projects around the world, and has a long history of involvement in environmental justice issues, and she'll be presenting shortly, and I'll just share her presentation and she can explain further. And she does have to deliver this presentation on the move in Jakarta, so please bear with me while I locate presentation. Just a moment. Yeah, I think we're there. There we go. Okay, can I leave it with you, Yuyun? Yuyun, are you muted? We just seem to be having a technical issue here. I'll just stop sharing for a moment and see if we can get Yuyun again. Yuyun, you appear to be muted.
Can you hear me, Lee?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Lee?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
For the moment, I will turn my video off because
Yeah.
I'm in the car. I'm sorry. Could you please yeah, share my screen? Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the IPEN webinar, and thank you, Lee, for inviting me. I would like to continue what Carmen already shared in Bolivia by sharing the information in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Lee.
Yes, I have moved it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in Indonesia, I did my research started from 2008, and then in 2011, I learned that the development of ASGM hotspots in Indonesia is following this kind of cycle. There are a lot of ASGM hotspots coming in, coming out, and then on the rise, and then after a certain period of time, there will be crisis because too many people in one place in a very short period of time, and then they kill each other, or the government shut down the mining site. It seems like in the ASGM hotspots A, the activity has stopped, but actually miners moved to the site B, and the same pattern repeated over and over again. That's how we have more hotspots over a period of time. Next slide, Lee, please. So as a result, we have identified more than 180 ASGM hotspots in 32 provinces of Indonesia, in 180 until 190 regencies, and also in at least 15 national parks. This practice taking place since the 80s until now. Some of them are still active, some of them are not, and of course leaving everything behind, so including the mercury contaminated sites. Next, please. As we all know, the route of exposures of mercury coming from SGM activities are mainly from the smelting of gold, where the vapor emitted to the air, and also eventually it will be deposited in one place, and it goes to our food chain. So in Indonesia, the mercury could be accumulated in fish, whether it's freshwater fish or seawater fish, and also in rice paddy. Yeah, so we can see also some exposures in biomarkers, and can be tested using several methods to identify symptoms, and also from biomarker testing. Next, please. These kind of activities are can be found easily in many places of Indonesia, and using the Lumex mercury analyzer, we can identify how high mercury vapor around the neighborhoods or in one village. For instance, the first photo showing the ball mills operation under a house. Many places in Indonesia have staged house, and below their houses, sometimes miners or communities have the processing units under their beds or under their rooms. And also sometimes they burn the gold in the kitchen, like the one that you see here. And when we measure the mercury vapor in that kitchen, it shows 53,716 nanogram per meter cubic meter. And some activities are taking place in front of the house, or at the backyard of the house, and eventually this mercury vapor deposited in the rice fields and in the fish, and sometimes during the burning of the amalgam, the family members also watching how gold appeared magically from the silver balls. Next, please. From the study that we conducted with the support from the World Bank, jointly with the Biodiversity Research Institute, we identified the literature studies and then collecting some new samples from 5 sites. And we learned that the abiotic parameters in many places in Indonesia already above the safe level. And in the biotics, in plants and fish, some of them also have high concentrations. However, the sample of fish that we look at from shows a low. There is a need to have more samples to ensure or to get more clear results. And in human biomarkers, in blood, hair, and urine, all are above the safe level. Next, please. Yeah, and we've also seen a lot of birth defects like this in ASGM hotspots. And a study by Nadine Steckling et al. Shows that 18 until 22% of ASGM miners suffered from chronic mercury vapor intoxication. However, these numbers are not included the communities and children in the area. We found more evidence that children affected by mercury exposures and have different outcomes in their health. Next, please. So, so we have identified also several available remediation methods in Indonesia. This is the study conducted by Bandung Institute of Technology and the Ministry of Environment back in 2018, identified the different methods of mercury remediations. And the price here showing in US dollars per ton. The different methods are consisted of phytoremediation, electrophysical chemical, soil washing, bioremediation, and mycoremediations, which is involving mushrooms. So the cost, the most cost effective is of course the non-fancy technology, which is phytoremediation. Phytoremediations can take about 19 until 20 months. And the potential remediation cost in 3 sites that have already identified by the Ministry of Environment or registered under the Ministry of Environment system, with about 40,000 tons of mercury contaminated soil. It cost about 700,000 US dollars for phytoremediations technology. And if we use the fancy one, like soil washing, it will cost about 3.5 million US dollars. And even the most sophisticated one is 1.6 billion US dollars. Of course, we would like to see more affordable technology in place. So we did several tryout and pilots to find the best way to develop the affordable remediation technology. Next, please. Yeah, so as Guido already explained at the beginning, we just started our collaboration project with the support from the Tau Foundation. We started with, we will start with the cleaning up the wells in Lombok and Sumbawa. And it started with inceptions, piloting, monitoring, and outreach. And we will use lab scale pilots and then laboratory tests and then implemented in the field. Next, please. The project is also supported by Mataram University, Durham University, and also by the US Department of State, Teredezom, Germany, and PT Aman Mineral Nusa Tenggara, which is a large gold mining company. Next, please. Yeah, what we try to do in this pilot is to find the local solutions to answer the global challenge. We will use the pomelo pills combined with seaweed to produce alginate, and then put it in the barrier to filter the water contaminated by mercury. Probably can use it also for soil contaminated sites. And then over a period of time, this mercury absorbent will be saturated, and then we will have to replace it because it's made out of the organic or biological matters. This will convert into stable mercury. Next, please. Yeah, so I think next, please, Lee. Yeah, so I just want to close it by reminding everyone that what we learned from Minamata, as explained earlier by Professor Nakachi, is that lessons learned from Minamata is first we have to act on symptoms and then identify the sources of pollution, investigate health effects, and then implement liability and compensation. This is in the case of company corporate pollution. And then raise public awareness and clean up the site in timely manner. So in Indonesia, we have a lot of sites that will need attention seriously before it's accumulated in the environment and human health. And environmental monitoring and compliance to the standards is very important. And we need to work together with a lot of parties or stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuyun, for that incredibly informative perspective on what's happening with contaminated site remediation at Indonesian ASGM sites. I believe we have a couple of moments left where we could perhaps take a question or two. Would anybody, participants, like to, I'll just check the chat. I'm sorry, it's a little long, but perhaps rather than going through the chat, would someone like to raise their hand and ask a question of any of our panelists? I don't see any. So perhaps we don't have any questions in that form. I'll just check the chat. We did provide a copy of the IPEN study in Bolivia with BRI, so people have a link to that if they wish to view it. I don't see any other questions appearing in the chat. Just reviewing those very quickly. And I don't think there are any. So I think that probably brings us to the end of the presentation and the side event for today, which I think has been very informative, crossing across many different issues related to contaminated sites from Europe to Bolivia to Indonesia and finally back to Minamata itself. And I think people may appreciate that last slide from Yuyun at COP1 of the Minamata Convention, where Shinobu Sakamoto and others were present to remind the convention, which is only a week or two away, that this is the outcome of mercury contaminated sites. It's contaminated fish, exposed people, exposed women, exposed babies, and a range of health impacts that occur. So we should always keep that at the forefront of our minds when considering what the COP is trying to achieve, and that it's to avoid any further Minamatas. And I think with that, we can probably bring this side event to a close. Thank you, everybody, for taking part today, and we've enjoyed the presentations, and it's good night from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chinky.
Thank you. Bye. Congratulations. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm in the